I know a place where dealers roam and they very scary. Try and bust your brain like when I pop the cherry.
While these may not be gangs such as Blood Crips, Latin Kings, why should we still be worried about the gangs that are in this area right now?
Why should we worry? Because right now they ruling the street right now. That's why we're worried. Trust me, they still got Bloods and Crips and Latin King and the STK and the Hilltop Boys, Elm Street Boys, the TMG. It's a lot of gangs that are around here. The Baby Yolo gang. There's a lot of gangs that people don't want to talk about. They're not being mentioned, and the streets are being run by the gangs. We're under siege.
Wilmington in late spring can look almost peaceful from a distance. Rows of brick homes, narrow sidewalks, kids cutting through side streets after school. On the afternoon of May 19, 2016, that ordinary scene shattered on Clifford Brown Walk, a short stretch of road that sits close to people's daily routines. A 15-year-old boy named Brandon B. Wingo was walking home from school with classmates when a shooter approached and opened fire. Wingo was struck and later died from his injuries. In a matter of seconds, a normal walk home became a crime scene, and a city was left trying to understand how a child could be hunted in broad daylight. In the days that followed, investigators began building a case that would stretch across years, courtrooms, and multiple trials. This would not be a simple prosecution. It would become one of the most complex homicide cases Wilmington had seen in that period, shaped by gang allegations, social media evidence, witness testimony, and repeated legal challenges. At the center of that case was Diamonte Taylor. From the beginning, police said the shooting was not random. Prosecutors alleged it was retaliation, tied to an ongoing feud between two street groups known as Shoot to Kill, or STK, and Only My Brothers, or OMB. According to the state, tensions between these groups had been building, fueled by previous violence and online posts. Investigators argued that insults and threats exchanged on social media had spilled into real-world consequences. Before Brandon Wingo was killed, prosecutors said there was already a pattern of violence unfolding. Court records described a series of robberies and shootings earlier in May 2016 that investigators believed involved members of the same group. The state presented these incidents not as separate crimes, but as part of a single, escalating conflict that set the stage for what happened on Clifford Brown Walk. The afternoon of the shooting unfolded quickly. Students were walking home from school in a familiar routine. Witnesses later described seeing a person dressed in dark clothing approach. Gunfire erupted. Students ran. Some hid. Others watched in shock as Wingo collapsed. The shooter fled. Within minutes, police and emergency crews flooded the area. Despite efforts to save him, Brandon Wingo died. Detectives gathered surveillance footage from nearby cameras, interviewed witnesses, and collected shell casings from the scene. Ballistics testing later linked the weapon used in Wingo's killing to other shootings tied to the broader investigation, according to court filings. Investigators also focused on vehicles seen in the area, including a light blue car that witnesses said appeared on Clifford Brown Walk shortly before the shooting. As the investigation developed, police identified several suspects. In June 2016, a grand jury indicted Diamonte Taylor, along with Zahir Smith, Kevin Dickerson, and Latasha Pierce. The charges went beyond murder. including conspiracy and gang participation, reflecting the state's theory that Wingo's death was part of organized retaliatory violence. Diamonte Taylor quickly became the focal point of the case. Prosecutors described him as a member of STK and alleged that he was directly involved in the events leading up to the shooting. In court filings, the state claimed that Taylor and others discussed Wingo earlier that day and made a decision that if he was seen, someone would be shot. The state argued that this was not a spontaneous act, but a deliberate response to perceived disrespect tied to the ongoing feud. Kevon Dickerson later entered a plea deal and agreed to testify for the prosecution. His testimony became a key part of the state's case, as he described who was present, what was said, and how the group moved before and after the shooting. Zahir Smith also pleaded guilty to multiple charges in the broader case, with murder charges dropped as part of his agreement, and later received a lengthy prison sentence. Latasha Pierce faced charges related to firearms and false reporting, tied to the movements and actions surrounding the shooting. In 2018, Diamonte Taylor went on trial for the murder of Brandon Wingo. Prosecutors presented a case built on witness testimony, surveillance footage, ballistic evidence, and digital data taken from Taylor's phones. They argued that the evidence showed intent, planning, and participation in gang-related violence. The jury convicted Taylor of first-degree murder and related charges. At sentencing in January 2020, Taylor received a mandatory life sentence for the murder conviction, along with additional prison time for other offenses. The verdict and sentence were presented as a measure of justice for a child killed in daylight while walking home from school. For the Wingo family, it was a moment of accountability after years of waiting. But the case was not over. Taylor appealed his conviction, focusing on the legality of the search warrants used to seize and examine his cell phones. In September 2021, the Delaware Supreme Court ruled that the warrant was overly broad and unconstitutional, amounting to a general search without sufficient limits. The court overturned Taylor's convictions and ordered a new trial, ruling that the digital evidence should have been suppressed. The decision sent shockwaves through the case. The facts of Wingo's death had not changed, but the legal footing of the prosecution had. The case returned to Superior Court, forcing prosecutors to reconsider their strategy without the phone data that had been central to the first trial. A retrial began in December 2023. Just days into the proceedings, the court declared a mistrial. The judge ruled that testimony from a gang expert risked unfairly influencing the jury, including statements that suggested personal interaction with Taylor. The mistrial halted the proceedings and delayed resolution yet again. By January 2025, the case reached its final outcome. Diamonte Taylor entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder and conspiracy. In court, he admitted to recklessly causing Brandon Wingo's death under circumstances showing cruel, wicked, and depraved indifference to human life. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. The sentence marked the end of an 8-year legal journey defined by arrests, trials, appeals, reversals, and retrials. It was not the life sentence originally imposed, but it was the conclusion the system reached after exhausting every procedural turn. Brandon Wingo's death remained unchanged by the shifting legal outcomes. He was still 15 years old. He was still walking home from school. Clifford Brown Walk remained the place where his life ended and where a community learned how quickly normal routines can be destroyed.